Hello friends, welcome to Flosstube and Variety Show number 49. I'm Emily Williams in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and I'm so glad you're joining me. I know I have several new subscribers since my last video, and I appreciate that, and a lot of folks have been viewing. I'm supposed to say, if you like this video, please subscribe, and I will say, I do advise that if you do like the video to subscribe and hit the notifications bell, because though I have been pretty consistent in recording and posting a video on Fridays recently, it doesn't always happen that way. So just a thought there. You might not want to miss it. And I don't mean to presume that, of course, this is the most important video you watch every week. I doubt that it is. I hope it isn't, really, because there are many more important things in life than watching this video. But I'm so glad you're with me today, and let's talk about what we're going to talk about. So Flosstube means cross stitch, variety show means other things that are of interest to me and hopefully will be of interest to you. Let's get going on cross stitch. Flea Market Flowers, this is, so take a good look because this is the second to the last time I'm going to show you this pattern. Flea Market Flowers, the designer is Holt, published by Fat Quarter Shop, their publishing division. I'm sorry, I'm leaning over because I meant to have this chair out for me to put everything on. Otherwise, it's even more of a tornado than it currently is. If you could see this table, but you can't. So anyway, Flea Market Flowers, I could have finished. In fact, I probably could finish in 1.5 evenings, but, and I didn't even make an attempt to partially smooth it out for you, sorry. But I just decided I wanted to do something else, which I'll show you in a minute, but so close. I'm looking forward to it. I had to stop myself. I really did. This is Snippet Tiger Stare. Boy, there are a lot of consonant blends that could get mixed up. Snippet Tiger Stare. Charting Creations is the publisher. And my goal had been to get all the way down to the bottom, which I did, in one color anyway. So this is what I have. This is 18 count sand colored Aida by Zweigart. It is not an over-dyed fabric. It's one of their fabrics that they produce. And where you see the stitching right down there at the bottom, that is the bottom. And you can see that it's not centered on the fabric. Yeah, I did measure, but I apparently didn't do my calculation correctly, but it's gonna be fine. It'll fit perfectly well. So what I'll do in the next several times I work on this is I will work from top. I will probably start up here and fill in those little stitches that are empty and then go down and fill in. The next big section on this right here is getting into the darker colors, including black. And down here there's some white, so I'll decide. I mean, I don't mean white, I mean light colors. There's actually possibly no white in this pattern. It may all be, very light cream and gray colors that represent the white part of the tiger stripes. I want to show that, but not now. I put the stuff in a stack so that I don't have to remember really what I was going to say. I just look and see what's next. So what's next? I show you this every time, even though recently I have not been using items from this. The Ultimate Sampler Motifs source book by Brenda. This is a wonderful, fun book. Really I enjoy browsing through it. And I have used a lot of things, including alphabets from there on the purple sampler. Now I'm just going to roll this up a little bit. I'm just going to remind you this is what it is. And I was working on the last time I showed this, I talked about the loon. And here's the canoe paddles. And now the new motif is a moose. I'm still on my Canadian camping in Canada theme, and I have a story to tell about that later in the video. But maybe a couple months ago, when I started charting that moose, I showed you just his hooves, and at least one of you guessed it was a moose. The person for whom I'm stitching it guessed it was a moose. So, yes, there's that. Now, what did I say I was going to talk about next? Okay, I will talk about this next. Actually, I'll pull up one of those items again in a moment to show you something different about it. So in my comments, both on the video itself and from other directions, I have gotten a couple of questions about exactly, I guess I'll say that it's more a question of what does counted cross stitch start with. We call it cross stitch. There are actually a lot of different ways to get at cross stitch, to do cross stitch. One of them is to buy a kit that has the design stamped on fabric, and then you stitch where it's marked on the fabric. Another way is to do stamped that isn't by exact squares. It's sort of I would say it's an old-fashioned method of cross stitch where the fabric is stamped with blue. It's usually blue, and then after you've stitched it, it washes out. So and it's often, I mean, I've seen it on linen, and it's tablecloths, and sometimes there's a combination of other embroidery stitches along with cross stitch. And usually it's bigger crosses, say 1/4 inch. And my mother and father and grandmother actually all worked together on a tablecloth that I have inherited and not going to finish. I may show it sometime before I do something else with it. But counted cross stitch is worked on a type of fabric that is even weave, and you count the threads in the fabric in order to decide where to put your threads for the design. And I'm going to show you a little freebie. And I'm going to show it briefly, but long enough for you to just get an idea of what a cross-stitch chart might look like. So this is created by Lori Holt, I think. I think it is. Yes, it is Lori Holt. And it's a granny squares, and I only printed it in black and white, which is another reason I feel pretty comfortable in showing it. But if you want to get this for yourself, you can go to the Fat Quarter Shop webpage, or you can get it from Lori Holt's website too, I believe. But this is a granny squares cross stitch, and you see there are little symbols there and the X's. And I wanted to show this for 2 reasons. One is to say this is what a cross stitch chart looks like for those who might be coming to this channel for other interests, say quilting and other things I do. That's what a cross stitch chart looks like. And also because I encourage everybody who does cross stitch to pick up this freebie, because what a great way to use up leftover threads. Now, if you know what a granny square is, it's a crocheted pattern which can be coordinated. It can be all color coordinated, where the person who's doing the creation of it, chooses yellow for the center and blue for the next round, and then red, and then joins them all together with green. That is very common, but it can also be used to use up your leftover yarn if you're a knitter or crocheter. Well, brilliant to create a granny square cross stitch idea that can use up extra threads. Now, what might you do with such a thing? Well, you could use it to embellish a note card, or to make a little pin cushion out of, or to make put a backing on it and make a little pretend crocheted coverlet for a doll's bed or something like that. Or just make something pretty out of it, and possibly even frame it. The point is that one of the things I've learned in quilt fabric selection is it's perfectly fine to combine all colors of the rainbow in one quilt design, one quilt. The important things come out to be lights, mediums, darks, and in the case of fabrics, large scale, medium scale, and small scale just prints on the fabric. That is really what you need. You need contrast, in other words, or I'll say variety. And certainly in a granny square cross stitch, you could use any colors. This happens to be charted for 4 colors per block. You could easily do it in 2 colors per block as long as you alternate them so that they're not right up next to each other. And use up your extra threads. And the reason that I was excited about this is because I have extra threads from projects that are not probably going to be things I would wind back into my bobbins and put back into my collection. I mean, I might. Frankly, that's one of the things I do, but I might not. So that is something I recommend. Oh, and the other thing I wanted to show, I'm gonna go ahead and show this purple sampler. Somebody asked about carried threads, and I think the best way to describe that is to show you the back. Now, here we go. I'm gonna give you a stern talking to here. I've been in Facebook groups where as soon as somebody asks something about the back of their cross stitch, the place erupts into highly charged, partisan, I don't mean politically partisan, I mean partisan of the tidy back and the it doesn't matter crowd. And it seems like it's black and white. It seems like there is no middle ground. And I am not trying to erupt any kind of battles over the backs. I also don't want you to compliment my back in the comments. I don't care. I have decided what I'm willing to tolerate in the case of tidiness versus untidiness in the back of my cross stitch, and I don't want to battle over it. But this is what my backs look like, and in particular carried threads. I carry between letters in this section. I carry between elements of a design like this, but where possible, and I don't know, I'm holding this up, I can't even tell if it's in focus on my phone, so maybe it's in focus for you. I do try to I go out to an area and then I try to follow back so that I'm not carrying directly across blank fabric. So I do take some amount of thought to where I'm putting my threads, but I'm not overly fastidious about it. In my experience with framed pieces is, from the distance you normally look at cross stitch, it doesn't matter. You can't really tell. There are ways, as I mentioned last week, you can put a gray paper or cardboard behind your item before you frame it. And the gray just sort of makes the carried threads disappear. It reduces the contrast and makes them disappear. So that is my thought on that. And that hopefully will enlighten a few folks who had some questions. So there you go. Again, no opinions on carried threads or tidy backs. Now, I'm sorry, I just put my hands down firmly on the table and the camera wiggled. I try not to do that. This past week, one of my friends that I have known from the time that I was born, because her mother and my mother were childhood friends, sent me an email saying, would you be interested in doing this? And there was a PDF attached to it. And I opened the PDF and I said, yes, I would actually be interested in doing this. And so she and I, with a lot of anxiety over whether it would work, registered for the Great British Sampler Weekend, which is September 29th through October 1st, 2023, i.e. 15 months from now. And we were worried that we wouldn't get in because in the United States, any kind of a retreat of this sort fills up before the breath is out of the presenter's mouth, really. I mean, it's amazing how fast these things fill up here. And I assumed that it would fill up just that fast, even though it's in England. And sure enough, apparently, I don't know how many spots they originally had, but it filled up before we really had hardly even submitted our registration request. So I figured we were on the waiting list, but Nicola Parkman, I don't know, is that how she says her name, Nicola? I'm sorry. I occasionally have watched her YouTube videos. She is the primary designer in Hands Across the Sea designs. This that I've shown before, the Harriet Salt Bristol sampler, is a Hands Across the Sea, whoops, Hands Across the Sea pattern, and Nicola is Hands Across the Sea. I'm trying to see if there might possibly be a picture of her in there. There isn't. Not surprising. That's fine. If you want to find out what she looks like, I do recommend her videos, and I'm going to start watching, and the current ones, she puts them out fairly often, maybe weekly or roughly weekly, and there are many old ones as well. I think she's in the 270s in terms of how many she's uploaded. Hands Across the Sea does beautiful sampler reproductions. I don't know if they do any original designs or if it's all reproductions, but it's gorgeous stuff. And I've seen it on many other floss tubes, and I'm now going to start to watch, I'm going to call her Nicola until I learn that that's not her name, that's not how she says her name. So anyway, whatever her name is, she is going to be the main presenter. She's from England. She has a lovely voice and accent and demeanor, and I think that it will be fun to meet her, and I imagine I will meet other people that I possibly have seen on Flosstube also, although they had to expand the registration capacity, and my friend and I did make it in, so we are going in 15 months. Now, I'm telling you this now because it's exciting right this moment, because it seems like we just had this big victory of getting in. And because it's a big deal to go to any kind of cross-stitch, any kind of retreat. I've mentioned before how much my friend Cindy and I enjoy our quilt show every year, which is the same idea. It's just much larger. But I've never been to a cross-stitch retreat. The YouTube people that I watch who've been to them all over the United States love it. They can't get enough. It's addictive. So I'm a little worried that I'm going to suddenly become addicted to going to cross-stitch retreats, which will be a problem because it's really hard to get into them normally. So I don't know. Don't know about that. But it looks like it's going to be a great weekend, and I'll say more about it as we get closer to the time. But one of the things I did want to mention that I will mention now as something I'm thinking about with regard to the retreat is I've said a couple of times that I might possibly stitch this. And since I'm going to meet the person who did the reproduction of the sampler, and one of the features of the retreat will be learning more about the Bristol orphanage sampler culture there, I think I probably am going to stitch it, and I probably will stitch it in red thread. And I'll probably, I think this is, the recommended size is 36. Well, no, actually this model was done in 56 count linen. I'm not gonna do that. I think that's crazy for me. I could certainly do it on 36 count linen, and in which case the size of it will be 23 by 23, basically. That's pretty big, but, you know, we'll see. Hands Across the Sea has done many other charts, and possibly I would be wiser to choose a smaller one. But what do you know? I don't know. I don't know what I'll do. One other thing I wanted to show you, just as a little update, is I have been working on this commission quilt, the Tumbling Blocks quilt, This is the chart that I'm working from, the design that my friend who is commissioned it. And I wanted to just give you an update on what I'm doing. So I had confidently reported last time that I would have no trouble learning to do the Y seams on my sewing machine. And that is true. I have had no trouble learning to do Y seams on my sewing machine. You see, that is a very nice intersection there. I'm very pleased with how these hexagons turn out. And as you recall, this quilt is designed such that there's a dark color on what I'll call the top, a medium color on what I'll call the right side of the block, and then a variety of lighter colors, mostly lighter, contrasting colors at least, on that left side of the block. So here are, what I've decided to do is I'm making all the hexagons, whoops, goes this way, all the hexagons first. And I just have a big stack of them in different colors. And then I was sewing them together. And I discovered that my bravado about being able to do this on my sewing machine was premature. And yes, I probably could figure it out, but I've decided I'm going to sew the hexagons together by hand. Because A, life is too short to be nervous about it, and B, I just don't know. I could make it work in little chunks of blocks, but I'm not sure as the pieces get bigger and there get to be more angles and you have to, you know, do more and more and more pivots. I was just confident. I was actually confident that I would be not confident. And so I have decided to sew the hexagons together by hand, which is fine. I enjoy hand sewing of all sorts, not just cross stitch. I can't remember if I've shown you my English paper piecing. I think I have. On older videos, I certainly talked about it. So some of you have been either you've been watching me from the beginning, which is wonderful, or you've been so kind as to mention that you've gone back to watch older videos, which is astonishing. But this is going to be very pretty. I'm just doing it by hand. And I also have more clarity from my friend on the deadline for it, so I feel much more confident about this. But I go up to the sewing room every 2 or 3 days and make a stack of these blocks, and then I sit down and watch baseball or random television and sew them together. So that's what I'm doing. Now I want to tell you a story. Let me just be sure that I haven't left anything else out. Okay. So the moose. I'm going to put a picture up here in a little bit, but let me tell you the story first. I'll put a picture up in a few minutes so you can just know that you can anticipate a picture. So when we would go camping, the same general location, Algonquin Provincial Park, where I mentioned a couple of videos ago when I had the conversation with the loon, we normally camp at Pog Lake, which is a small lake. It's a lake you can easily see to the other side of. And then it has a little branch that goes off over on this direction, east maybe. Doesn't matter. That it's also small, and there's camping all along. We have a site that's near the beach area and that's near the boat launch area. And we have our canoes. And one of the beautiful things about this little lake is that it has a little river that you can see the mouth of across from our campsite. And it's a little meandering river, and it goes into Lake of Two Rivers, which is the larger lake that I mentioned the last time I talked about this. But it's just a little meandering river, not long, easy to get to across the small lake and easy to paddle. And the other thing is that at the time of year that we've been there, which is August, the days are warm and the nights are cool or even cold. And one of the things that results in is mist rising off the lake in the morning. It's fantastic to be canoeing on the lake or on that little river when the mist is on it. And so this one particular year, my friend Cindy, my quilting buddy, I've mentioned her many times before, she and I and her family, my family, our friend Anne, for whom I'm doing the purple sampler, here's all the connections, got it now. We were all camping together, and Cindy and I agreed that we were going to get up really early the next morning in hopes of the lake having mist on it and that we could go out canoeing in the mist. So we did. And we got up early, there was mist, and we went out, we crossed the lake, and we entered the little river. And we went all the way to Lake of Two Rivers, which is not far at all, you know, might be a mile altogether, and looked at the sun shining on the mist, and then we turned back. And on this little river, it's not a wide river. It's maybe 30 feet wide, possibly. And there was some noise in the underbrush over to our left. So we're canoeing along in the middle of this little river, and over to our left is some noise. And I said, Cindy, look over there. So she's in front and I'm in back, and I'm the one who always has the camera handy because I do. And we look over there, and there is a young bull moose. Now this is August, so it's not the rutting season, which is usually the end of September and October. And this moose was young because his antlers were not very well developed, and they were still pretty much covered with velvet. So he was still growing them. They would have, you know, in another 6 weeks, by mid to late September, they would have been much bigger than they were. But here's this bull moose. Now, if you live in an area where there are moose, you should know, and if you don't, I hope that this video is not where you're learning this from. Moose are not tame. They are dangerous creatures, and you really need to keep your distance from them, and you need to not provoke them. So here we are in the middle of the river, and here's the moose, and he gave us the eyeball. He looked at us, and he was walking along the edge in the underbrush, and we were in the river. And I said to Cindy, you keep the canoe straight, and I'm going to take some pictures. And so she was in front, and so she paddled a little bit just to keep the canoe straight. The current was going with us. We were heading toward home in this case, so all she really needed to do was keep the canoe straight. And especially, it was advisable to not let the canoe drift over to the left toward the moose too far. And so he walked along in the underbrush, and I snapped pictures, and she kept the canoe straight, and then he got in the river ahead of us. And he passed, well, now I'm going to put the picture up, or I will have by now. What would you say it is? 20 feet ahead of our canoe at most. And he crossed the river, and he climbed out on the other side, and he disappeared into the woods. Unbelievable. And of course the mist is still on the water a little bit. I mean, it was quite otherworldly. Just an amazing experience. And this is why I love camping, and why I love camping in Algonquin Provincial Park, because you do see moose there. We've seen moose other times, bull moose some, but also cow moose, and we've been there in June, the time I told you about that we had all the mosquitoes and black flies. We saw a cow moose with quite a young baby, maybe there were 2 babies. I think not. I think I only remember seeing one, but my memory is not what it used to be. We think that baby was within a few days old. Nonetheless, moose, what an experience. So this is why I had to put a moose in this sampler for my friend with whom we have been camping. So that is all I wanted to talk about today. I hope you found something of interest and enjoyable. And if you're going to the Great British Sampler Weekend, I'd love to hear about that in the comments. I used to try, here's a housekeeping, yes, I have 2 housekeeping things. One is, I used to try to keep the videos under 25 minutes. I don't know why that hasn't worked recently. They've been much more like 30, 32 minutes. This one will be in the low 30-minute range. If you have an opinion about that, I'd love to hear it. I'm mostly figuring that if people watch it, I mean, the statistics that I can see on YouTube show me that people do watch it. People don't seem to tune out after 1 minute, so I don't know. So you can tell me if you want to. Here's the other thing about the cookbooks. So as of the time that I started filming this, 8 people had requested cookbooks. And I'm going to send cookbooks to all 8 of you. So I'm gonna leave my email address at the top of the description box this time, so it's easy for you to find. And if you were to look through the whole description box, you'll see that I list everything I mention, try to anyway. Now here's the twist on this. I thought I had a whole stack of the More Emily's Kitchen, the smaller collection. I find that I don't. I only have 2. So 2 of you will get that one along with the Emily's Kitchen 2nd edition. And the rest of you will just get the Emily's Kitchen 2nd edition. Now, my husband and I both sort of were thinking about where we might have stashed any extras. And his comment was, you should retype it. And I think, yes, I probably should. Maybe it's time to think of a 3rd edition or a more Emily's Kitchen or something, because certainly I have amassed some new recipes that we use often. Since even 2015, I think I said, is when More Emily's Kitchen came out. I created. So maybe I will do that, and if I do, I will mention it here and you can request again. Those of you who are not the lucky pair who get both books this time around. So sorry to disappoint, but all 8 of you will get this, and I will comment on your comments so you will know that you're one of the 8 that had your comment in before this video was recorded. People who watch this video after the fact and wish they had not missed out, just watch in the future. There may be another chance, because I do actually still have copies of the 2nd edition. But if I put out a 3rd edition, who knows? Who knows what will happen? So anyway, this is more than 30 minutes. Thank you again so much for watching, for joining me. I hope that you have a great stitching week or whatever else you are doing this week. And many blessings to you, friends.